I want to share with you my personal story. My personal story and my wish to become a journalist and the difficulties I had during the ongoing economic crisis in Greece. Actually, I finished my PhD in the UK in 2008, and then I found a permanent position in a Greek newspaper, and my obligation was to have a column on the last page of the newspaper, so it was a good job. And I started this job in the summer of 2009. I was very happy. It was only a few months after I had finished my PhD in the UK, and I thought that a new career could be ahead for me. 3 months later, towards the end of 2009 and beginning of 2010, I entered the office of the director, of the managing director of the newspaper, with whom, as well as with the owner, we had a very good personal relationship. He told me to close the door. I closed the door, and I thought he wanted to share with me his ideas about my next article. And he said to me, "Look, George, due to the economic crisis, we cannot keep you on our newspaper any longer. You are fired, and I'm very sad to tell this to you, but it's impossible any longer because the banks are not giving us any loans, and Greece is entering an unprecedented economic crisis, meaning that also adverts from the public sector will be reduced." I was shocked, but I had to look for an alternative. And this is what made me to look for ways in order to be able to stay in Greece, because many young Greek people want to stay in the country irrespective of the crisis, and even if they receive lower salaries. So Greece became the epicenter of international attention because the European partners of Greece had to save the country in order to keep it in the Eurozone. And this meant that so many international media started to look at the Greek crisis and wanted people to analyze what was going wrong with the country. Actually, Greek politicians at the beginning of the crisis were saying that that the budget deficit was approximately 5 or 6%. Later, we found out that it was 15%. So the international media were shocked. They wanted to find people in Greece with whom they could talk and with whom they could better analyze the problem and their perspectives for the future. So this is how it started. I approached various international media approached me in order to discuss the Greek crisis. This said, in a period of approximately 3 or 4 years, I gave interviews to almost all international media discussing the Greek problem. This happened in live discussions in very difficult moments for my country. So the question for me was, I had either to say the truth about Greece or also defend my country, because I wasn't very happy to see my country vilified at the international level, and especially by journalists. So my job was very difficult at that time. Nevertheless, what I decided to do was to say the truth, because I think that my generation is paying a crisis for which it is not responsible for, and we need to say the truth and prepare a better generation for difficult days to come. So this is what I did. But at the same time, I also attempted to explore this opportunity and see how I could proceed. Okay, talk to international media was a solution for a short period of time, but then as I had a PhD in media and communication studies, I wanted also to look at the future and find out what else I could do. So I collected all the material from the personal interviews I had with international media, and I also did some research on how newspapers from all over the world were looking at Greece, and this is how I arrived at the publication of my second book on how the world sees Greece during the crisis. Obviously, this was an academic book, but sharing personal experiences from the talks I had with journalists. Writing this book, I believe that I can better understand how practically most journalists want. Speaking to so many journalists from all over the world, there is one single conclusion that I can reach. This is that they are interested in publishing negative stories. They want to publish negative stories. I had talks with them about positive things in Greece, like in the shipping industry, for instance, but they were not interested in that. They were interested in exploring pathogenies like bureaucracy or tax evasion or corruption, which were problems indeed. I was the first to say that to them. But never they were interested in exploring positive things about the country. However, as I said, to publish a book would not be the end for me. I need to continue. And using all the research, I found out that there were similar problems, not only for Greece, but also for Europe. There was a serious misunderstanding during the Greek crisis. People, especially in Germany and other countries, but I'm focusing on Germany because it is the leading power in the European Union paying more for the Greek bailout, didn't understand the Greek crisis in a fair and correct way. On the other hand, Greek media were not very much eager to say the truth and reveal it, and were putting the blame for the crisis, for the Greek crisis, to Germany. So this created a serious misunderstanding between journalists and the media. And by looking at some example of cover pages, you see how the problem can be seen in specific media. On the one hand, we are seeing German journalists seeing Greece as asking for money by the European Union, say Germany. On the other hand, we are seeing Greek media blaming the German Chancellor Angela Merkel and Finance Minister Wolfgang Schäuble for the continuous drama. So we had to do something about it. Is it Europe? I remember even being a student here at SIF that the European public sphere was part of the agenda, part of the public agenda, part of our lectures, part of our presentation. Can we talk about a European public sphere when you look at media like that? It's impossible. So you have to do something about it. So my next step was to see how I could cooperate with some German colleagues and try to, if not fill the gap, at least find ways of cooperation between Greek and German journalists. So I approached some German foundations which were interested in supporting projects of bringing journalists together, like Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, for example. And what they did was that they gave me the responsibility to find journalists in both Greece and Germany. They paid the expenses, and we brought the journalists together, one time in Greece, another time in Germany, and they started to discuss about stereotypes. You remember the cover pages before. So through open dialogue, through free dialogue, they tried to solve the problem. It was partly successful, I could say, and I'm very happy about this, that I have played a small role in bringing the two sides together. And what is even more important is that this happened especially with young journalists. Young journalists from Greece and Germany had nothing the one against the other. They wanted to cooperate, but due to the stereotypes of the media themselves, they couldn't escape from that. So what we did was to create and construct a new website, a new web page, where they could publish their own joint stories. So this has played a role. And in 2015, with the refugee crisis, perhaps this was a springboard for an even more important success. Seeing the refugee crisis from a German perspective meant that there was kind of solidarity for the Greek case. So for the first time, we saw some journalists cooperating with their Greek colleagues and published positive stories about Greece, which I had not seen in my book published in 2013. So I'm very happy to be part of all this. However, the main difference for the future is that we should not any longer focus on Greek-German stereotyping. What we should do is to focus on the future of Europe. So my new efforts are concentrating on this, because when we are talking about Europe, it's not just Greece and Germany, although the two countries have a special role during the crisis. It's about Europe, how we understand Europe, and especially how people in Greece and Germany understand Europe. However, as far as myself is concerned, you cannot, for your whole life, deal with the thing of the Greek crisis. I consider it, I hope at least, it is a passé issue, so I need to look towards the future. The Greek crisis opened some ways, some doors for me for the future, but it's not sufficient. Because even now, for example, international media do not pay attention to Greece. It is even a boring issue, especially in Germany. They have covered everything. So if there is another political crisis next summer, I assume German journalists will come to Greece again. But it's not a new topic. It's not a topic which can attract the attention of the international media any longer. So what I tried to do was that through the contacts I made during the crisis, to approach international media and act there as a commentator, but not any longer about the Greek crisis. It was mainly international relations and other political issues which could be of interest. So we are talking today about media and transition in the media. What does it mean? It means that we need to take into account that the advancement of technology plays an important role for journalists. So I started also to cooperate with Chinese media. And yes, it's very simple. A few hours ago, for example, I sent them a message through WeChat, which is the network they are using for social media, and I proposed them a topic. They said to me, yes, write about it. Later I send it, and on Monday it would be published. As simple as that. You can understand that although the distance is very big and very far away, China from Europe, through the technology, through the internet, through the emails, this is possible to do it. So China and Chinese media are the new way where I could find kind of professional absorption during the ongoing economic crisis. And also, I established my own startup in Greece named ChinaandGreece.com, which attempts to analyze how China is viewed in Europe and how the relations between the European Union and China can develop in the future. So this is another lesson during the crisis on how we can possibly find ways in order to escape from the problem instead of complaining it, because the problem is there. The thing is how we can get out of it and how we can find some better perspective for the future. Last but not least, the fake news. We are talking about media and transition in the media today. Fake news is a hot issue in the United States. We do not know what happened with Russia and its intervention in the American election in 2016. We have Brexit. However, even in Greece, even in countries where the problem hasn't been that extensive as it happened in the United States or in the UK, for instance, there are discussions, there are debates about what we can do about it. And I can tell you that due to the ongoing crisis, the trust of Greek citizens to traditional media is very limited. This means that people, because they do not trust traditional journalists, they are tending on finding alternative sources of information. So they are looking into social media, and this said, they very often are victims of fake news. So what is the way that young Greek scholars of the media sector can possibly find ways to cope with the crisis? It is possibly to look for funding in order to build websites which can check the facts. This is happening in the United States. This partly happens in Greece. And there are foundations, not only in Europe and the United States, but also in Greece, which are interested in financing that kind of project. So innovation, even in the media sector and even in Greece, could be another solution, and a solution I myself is considering in order to be able to stay in Greece, but also find some resources in order to be able to cover the living expenses. Last but not least, another issue where young Greek journalists who are interested in finding financing can be looked at is in creating websites which can inform citizens and even children about fake news and about the quality of education. This is called media literacy. This is a new sector for Europe and for Greece, but very promising. Thank you very much for your attention.